Welcome into the I-80 Boys College Football Show. As always, I am Christian Hunt, that guy right over there who is starting to get his gray hairs in, is one...
Chris Vaca. That would be me, the co-host of this show. Christian, we had a big game last night to end the college football season.
Some people have described it as that. It was a big game. I thought it was... compared to some of the other games we've watched, Chris, like last year's national championship, what was that, a 65-7 beatdown, basically? It was a good game up until the end. I know we touched on it a little bit. It reminded me almost of 2 years ago when Georgia played Bama, and it was real close up until that fourth quarter with about, 3-4 minutes left to go. Georgia had a pick six and then pretty much pulled away from them and left no doubt. Kind of the same thing happened in this game. You know, there was about 4 minutes left to go in the game. I think Penix ended up throwing an interception, and that pretty much sealed it right then and there.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't put this in my top, 15, 20 best national title games or anything like that. But, it was a good game. And by the way, hats off to Michigan. They proved they were the best team in the country. 15-0 is nothing to laugh at. They out-physicaled everybody all year long. They really didn't ever have to go outside their comfort zone. They led every single game. I think they pretty much were in this year the entire time. Honestly, I watched Michigan a ton over here in the Big Ten, and they got off to that hot start with Donovan Edwards with the two big runs. He had 2 carries for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's the backup. That was crazy.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. And, Washington, we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. But with Michigan, like I said, man, that defense was really good this year. Elite. One of the better defenses I've seen in a while. I put them up there with some of the Georgia defenses. I'm not going to say they're probably better, but no way to prove that. But, I mean, they didn't sack Penix a ton in this game, but they made him throw off his back foot a ton too, though. You notice that? And they put some shots on him there at the end. And I don't know, Penix looked like he was in a lot of pain at the end of that game.
Yeah. He was, like you said, Chris, I mean, he was, what was that old Sam Darnold saying? He was seeing ghost almost. It felt like it was really weird. It felt like this moment really for a lot of the Washington side, especially on the offensive side, it almost felt like it was too big for them, right? They got it. They drove down. They kick a field goal. They're down 3-7. They don't score until like right there at the half. Now it's 10 to whatever it was, 17 at that point. They get another, they kick another field goal. So now it's 13-17. Was that pretty much the score for most of the night? 13-17, if I'm not
13-20, or
13 to 20.
Got that field goal right away after that.
That's right.
Yeah.
They must have, it looked like they had a Make-A-Wish kid out there kicking field goals for him. That's what I think of every time Washington's kicker trots out there. I know I look just like him, so I know. But I digress.
I want to talk about Penix's play for a second, though.
Yeah.
He probably played one of the best games, Christian, ever in that playoff, the first round game. I mean, he was on fire. You made a comment before the show started. He looked like Joe Burrow out there. I agree. Equally, and on the other side, this was one of the worst performances I had seen from a quarterback in a national title game that was known for slinging the ball. I don't know. I've heard the excuses the day that he was hurt all season. I don't want to hear that crap. He looked fine against Texas. Everybody's hurt. But, God, I don't know if he was rattled or what it was, but he didn't make one accurate throw all night. I mean, he missed Rome Odunze on a fourth down where he I don't even know why he threw a bullet 30 yards down the field when he could have just lofted it up there. Odunze was wide open.
I think that hit him, though, didn't it? Like, it hit him in the hands and he dropped it?
There's still, he just did not need to put the velocity on the ball like that. It was way over his head. Odunze made a hell of a try for it. But the dink and dunk, I didn't agree with that all night. Seemed like, maybe you credit Michigan's defense there for playing everything in front of them, but it just, I don't get it when you got 3 elite wide receivers and one hell of a quarterback that can drop it in a bucket. Stretch the field, because there were times last night where those receivers were winning those routes, and Penix looked off, man. He looked way off.
Yeah, he was, they showed it, right? Like where they were doing that reverse angle right there where you were kind of seeing what he was seeing. And, there was an underneath route, which he tried to go to, and Michigan was sitting on it. But then they had a seam route, that one of their receivers was running. He was wide open.
Yeah.
I mean, and almost as kind of weird as it was to say, even when they were down there, they scored the touchdown. He literally was pointing out, "Hey, he's being held," and then he throws that. He was like he was worried almost too much about all the other stuff going on, other than just kind of hitting his reads. Look, he had an off game, right? It happens. I mean, I'm not gonna say this was his worst game he had at Washington or in his career, but it just was. It happened to probably. He had a down game, I think, against a really good defense, and I give credit to Michigan. I mean, they also. Whenever he would have a good play, I mean, they would get called for holding. They would get a false start. They got behind the chains. It was just kind of frustrating. Dylan Johnson, that injury, Daniel says that injury really hurt. Yeah, I mean, I think that hurt. I'm going to say this. That was phenomenal watching that kid play as banged up as he was. I mean, it was inspiring. I got on my elliptical today and said, I'm going to quit being a little bitch. I'm going to go run. You know what I mean? Because he could do it. I mean, he was on one leg basically the whole night.
Yeah, shit. The other foot that he was on the one leg with was all fucked up too. I mean, that poor kid. I don't know how much success though Washington was really going to get on the ground against Michigan, but I don't. Like I said, Washington had one hell of a run. I mean, this season nobody thought they'd be in this game. Very few people did. From you go way back in the start of the season. Very few people even had him win in the Pac-12. And, Christian did, and there wasn't a lot of people out there that thought that was going to happen with as loaded as the Pac-12 was this year. So, like I said, hats off to both teams. To me, Michigan, they did everything they needed to do all year. There's no debate they're the number one team in the country. Like I said, I would still love to watch Michigan play Georgia this year with the current rosters. I know that's never going to happen. I'm not saying that Michigan couldn't beat them, but I just think that would be a really good game. Nothing against Washington. They had a hell of a season as well. Christian, what else you got?
Well, I think that's kind of what this is all segueing to, right, Chris, where we would see a 12-team playoff, I think, is anybody can get lucky. We saw it last year. I almost want to say with TCU, right? Like, was it luck so much that they beat Michigan in that opening round game? They go to the national championship and they get smoked 65-7, or was it? Were they just that good? And then Georgia was that much better than everybody else. I don't think that was quite it. I want to start seeing more games like, the Michigan-Alabama game, the Texas-Washington game.
Yes.
I want to see more games like the Ohio State-Georgia game last year. I want to see more games like that, Chris. And by the way, somebody made a point. I think the Rose Bowl should permanently be where we have the national championship every year.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and that's this 12-team playoff couldn't come any quicker. I mean, especially after this season with the whole Florida State fiasco and all that. And I'm with you. I would love to see Oklahoma play Oregon in the first round, or Oregon have to play Florida State or somebody like that. It'd be great for college football fans, because I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to come out here and say it. 90% of these bowl games that were played this offseason, or this season, were garbage. It was painful to watch most of them, Christian. I think you would agree. I mean, nobody cares about some of these 7-5, 6-6 teams. I don't agree that a 6-6 team should ever get a bowl game. That's just my opinion. You can type in the comment section how much you disagree with that. Yes, I know it's good for the program. I understand it's good for the kids, the extra 15 practices. I get all of that. But as far as anybody watching this shit, nobody wants to watch it. I don't think going 500 it should be rewarded. That's just my opinion.
No, I agree with you, Chris. I think let's do this. I mean, we'll probably touch on it more, down the road, what we think, right, and all of that. This is what that 12-team playoff would have looked like this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Game.
That would have been a damn good game right there. Florida State versus Liberty. Now, looking at, we don't have a ton of Florida State fans on the channel, but, looking at the context of it, that would have been a damn good game, I think.
I actually think so, with no Jordan Travis. Mm-hmm. Liberty was not a bad team this year, before their coach left and their quarterback's leaving too, but Liberty was a pretty damn good team. I mean, they did go 13-0 up until the Oregon game, and they made it a game for about a quarter. I mean, that's all I think you can expect. But I'm with you. I think Florida State Liberty, as currently constructed at the end of the year, I think that would have been a decent game. I really, truly do.
Penn State, Ohio State, that would have been another rematch right there. Georgia, Ole Miss. I mean, That would have been another good one, I think, right there. Listen, I know. Here's the thing: if Georgia can get a rematch against Alabama, I mean, obviously you favor whoever lost the game. I think, right?
Yeah, that's how that
I
series
mean,
goes.
we never get to see Ole Miss rematch anybody, right? Because they always have 2 or 3 losses a year, and you never really get to see them rematch. There's no revenge factor, you know. I would be curious to see what a team like Ole Miss, as much talent as they have, would do in a playoff scenario where they rematch against somebody.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you would definitely think. I know Georgia blew the doors off them during the regular season, but I would have to think if they get another shot, and it's hard to beat the same team twice. That's any sport, whatever it is in the same season. I do think that game would have been a lot closer if they had to play again, which would have been great to watch, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, anything. I think anything is better than what we have now. Where you know next year, thank God we're going to this 12-team playoffs, but the bowl games will still be irrelevant, right? You're still going to have people opting out, jumping in the portal. It's going to be a mess. And like I said, we're going to touch more on this in the off season. There's conspiracy theories that are floating around out there, and I've said it for a long time. Fast pain relief. If you need anything, by the way, why don't we take a look here? What is that? A little bit of some Bayer now at the Dollar General. By the way, shout out to Dollar General. Anyways, where was I at, Chris? Sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
You were going along the lines of next season. We'll talk a little bit more about the transfer portal. People are going to be opted out. Nobody gives a shit about bowl games, me included.
Yeah, sorry, I got a little ahead of myself there trying to do an ad read. Save that for the big time. But no, I think one of the big things is, Chris, when we talk about this, the NCAA is one of the strictest institutions, you know what I mean, in all of sports, basically. I think they were tougher than the NFL. I think they're tougher than FIFA. They're tougher than, you name a sport, they are probably the toughest as far as a governing body. At least they were before all this NIL and transfer portal stuff happened. And I think a lot of that came down because Congress said, hey, you have to pay athletes now for their name, image, and likeness. And so I think the NCAA threw their hands up and said, you know what? Screw it. If that's what you want, we'll do it. We won't put any guardrails in. We're going to open the transfer portal. We're going to make this thing, we're going to let the guardrails completely off of it. And we're just going to step back and we're just going to be here for whatever, right? And I think they did that in part so that down the road, they can now go to Congress. They can now go to the powers that be and say, hey, listen, we tried it y'all's way and look at what happened. It didn't work. So we need to get more control back. And I think mark my words, Chris, in the next 10 years, they will come back and it will swing back the other way. I think it has to, right? Right now, there's too much power in the athlete's hands. I know, hey, the same way a coach can jump ship, if you're at Liberty, he can go jump ship and go to Auburn or go to wherever, or a coach at Ole Miss can go jump ship and go to Bama or whatever have you if Saban were to retire. I get all that. But, kids are getting paid now. It's the same way that if I sign a 5-year, $40 million contract to go play, tight end for the Atlanta Falcons, and 2 years in, Arthur Smith gets fired. You know what I mean? Well, I'm kind of stuck there. Now, the thing I can do is I can demand a trade, right? But they don't have to trade me.
No.
Matter of fact, they can take money away from me. So there's all these things that kind of play into it. And it's a mess. I mean, regardless, it's a mess. We're going to put out more videos about it. I think one of the things that I hate to see is, you look at right now, like Michigan and Washington, they really, if you think about it, they've kind of lost out the most out of this because like Michigan won the national championship and they're going to celebrate. But what's going to happen over the next week or 2 weeks is they've got to move forward. They've got a whole bunch of people they're going to leave. They've got to contend with getting a new coach possibly after a lot of the candidates are already well out of the pipeline there. I mean, it kind of screws them in a way, right? Especially if the NCAA comes down and they start sanctioning them for the whole, stuff that happened earlier in the year, in the middle part of the year.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing. I do think Michigan is in a good spot. I think they're going to promote what's his name, the guy that filled in for Harbaugh.
Jerome Moore.
Yeah, he did do a really good job. Seemed like the players like him. I don't know that for a fact. Don't quote me on it. But Harbaugh definitely won't be there at the end of the year. He's already talking to the Raiders. I follow a lot of NFL. I mean, he's been trying to get in the NFL now for the last 3 or 4 years. He did what he needed to, accomplish what he needed to, got Michigan the national title. He could walk away and be done and go to the NFL and do whatever you want, buy kids burgers, do whatever the hell you want there. But I'm with you. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, especially with Michigan. Washington as well. I think Washington won't have too tough a time reloading. They got what's his name, Will Rogers. Is that right? Coming to play quarterback from Mississippi State next year.
Yeah.
He can throw the football. I don't know. He's no Michael Penix. Now I will say that, but yeah, it's going to be different. I know we're going to talk a lot more about this, the changes that need to happen for another day, but something definitely needs to change. This was one of the worst. Me personally, I've been watching college football for 30 years. One of the worst bowl seasons I've ever watched, as far as, and I'm not blaming anybody here. It just was boring. It was. There were a lot of people opting out, nobody playing. I usually look forward to that time of the season, right? I used to look forward to when Nebraska wasn't very good and they're terrible now, would play in a 6-6 bowl or 7-5 bowl against Georgia. We played against Doc Early twice, but believe it or not, those were still really good games, though. They were fun to watch, even though the teams and records weren't that great.
No, I mean, you said it exactly right, Chris. I mean, it was still fun to watch, because you knew, hey, unless somebody was seriously banged up, you were going to get, the best the other team had to offer. I mean, it meant something, but now it doesn't really mean anything. I mean, you got teams that are, they've got guys that are transferring out, but they're staying at the school for one last game. Some of them are like, nah, screw that. I'm not doing that. You can do what you want to do. I'm off.
I got a question on that point. Was it, and maybe I'm wrong here, wasn't it Bryson Barnes for Utah had already put in the transfer portal but played in the bowl game? That's weird to me, man.
Yeah. That's why I think that they really need to take a couple games out of the season away. They need to go to a 24-team playoff. They need to make the whole month of after mid-November all the way to mid-December. Like, to me, I don't think that, I know why they do it. They want the national, here's the thing. If you really want to do this and you want to do it right, this is the way they should do it. The national championship game should be played on New Year's Day.
Used to be.
Right. This should be played on New Year's Day. And then after that game, there's 2 weeks of the portal will open for 2 weeks.
Right.
That's the way they should do it. Right. So you can start it in December. Everybody gets basically like 2 weeks or whatever have you. Conference championship games, they get played like middle of November. They wrap up around middle of November. And then you get 2 weeks. So everybody can get healthy. You get the best on best. And then once the playoffs start, in December, if you didn't make it to a conference championship, your team gets 2 weeks or a month or whatever have you, basically a month to practice. So if you bring in a new coach, that coach has a whole month to evaluate who he's got, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or a 2 week period, right? A 2 week period to basically a practicing if you don't make it. Because that's the biggest thing there, right? You get to kind of play and do some of those things and whatever have you.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot of changes. I will also add the one thing I can't stand and haven't been able to stand for years is when the season ends after the conference title game and you say you're one of the teams that's in the 14 playoff currently, that fucking 5 weeks where those teams don't play, that's too long. It makes no sense. It's never made sense to me. I remember when Nebraska won it in 94, 95, their last game was against Colorado on Thanksgiving Day, and then they didn't play until New Year's. I mean, that's a long time. I'm a big believer and you should continue to keep playing. That's why I want a bigger format as far as the playoffs go and tighten up, like you said, get rid of a couple of those, PUD non-con games in the regular season, shorten it up, start the playoff. Just like they do NCAA basketball. That's the perfect version of it there. That's just a bigger version of it. But I wish they would do something. They got to do something with that, man. I believe teams get rusty. I still think that's partially the reason why Michigan lost last year to TCU. They didn't play for 5 weeks. You sit around, you don't do anything.
I know they talk about that. They talk about that in baseball a lot. You know what I mean? Like where the Braves, they tried to get away with it this year, and they got smoked by the Phillies in the opening round of the playoffs. They got a bye, and they were, it kind of screwed them because they were out of their element. But like you said, I mean, you got to figure out a way. You got to figure out a way to kind of knock that rust off. And I mean, the good teams do, right? I mean, like Georgia. I mean, Georgia's one of those weird teams. I feel like when they have a long layoff like that, one thing that they do is, and Bama, I think Bama's the same way when they have a long layoff. They just kind of, they practice physical. They practice super physical, man.
Yeah, I think it's part of it. Those teams have also been there a ton. But I'm just saying as a fan, like I hate the fact you got to wait, forever. and they keep extending this and pushing it further out. I know some stuff is going to change, but I think they need to shorten up some of the stuff. Get rid of the effing 6-6, 7-5 teams. I'm telling you, I don't. I like I said, I'm even a Nebraska fan. We can't make a bowl game, even if we did this year. Nobody's watching that game outside of Nebraska fans. I mean, seriously.
What if, and hear me out now, what if we did something very experimental and they went to like a scrimmage format? You know, like how some high schools, like for their spring game, they would scrimmage other teams. So you cut some of that fat off, because the way we're proposing this to go down, there would be a ton of like, you'd have a game here and you wouldn't have a game for 2 weeks. You'd have a game, then you wouldn't have a game for 2 weeks. What if your team didn't make it to a bowl game or the playoff, let's say, you get one opportunity and it's the week before the playoffs start, basically it can't be on conference championship weekend and it can't be when the playoffs are starting, but you get an opportunity to scrimmage another team.
Yeah, you could do that. That's what the NFL does before the preseason starts. The Dolphins go play against the Bucks. They practice against them like literally for a week, right? Or Jacksonville, somebody who's close. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I guess I'm not big on the participation trophy, which is what they do now. Oh, you went 500, or Minnesota, for example, was 5-7 this year, plays at a bowl game. I'm so sick of it. Like, I think if you win, you should be rewarded for a decent season, not going 6-6 and nobody wants to watch Troy versus Minnesota or Georgia Southern, for example, or somebody like that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, it's just, and that's where college football, I think, is at, Chris. I mean, it's at a point where it's a business now more so than it's ever been. And I mean, the TV, we talk about this all the time, TV ratings, like Minnesota and Bowling Green, like, who the hell on a Tuesday night, is going to watch that, for a bowl game?
Yeah.
Like you said, Georgia Southern and Troy, like, who the hell is going to watch that? Like, that can't be that you can't tell me in any world that would not do more ratings than Florida State and Liberty for a chance to play, I don't know, Alabama, in a playoff game.
I agree. No, I agree. That's what kills me about it. I know it's all about money, and I know these bowl games, they hand out tons of money to the team that whatever both team, I get all of that, but like, you can't tell me TV ratings. So yeah, is anybody really watching those games?
Yeah.
The degenerate gamblers like myself will bet on them, but I got it off in the background and I might look at the score. I really ain't watching it. And it's even worse now because of the transfer portal, right? Nobody's playing. They got backups playing. Nobody cares. Coach is already gone. I mean, for some of the teams, it's just like,
yeah,
does anybody care?
No, and I think that's the problem. Nobody cares. I mean, it's one of those things, like you said, Chris, nobody really cares, and it's a mess. And I think eventually it'll get sorted out. The same way that for years, I mean, when the BCS was here, we begged and begged and begged, like this whole splitting championship thing. I mean, it's un-American. We don't need to be doing that.
No, that's kind of funny you brought that up, because that was Michigan's, last national title was 97. They split with Nebraska, and I was never so bad when I was 13 years old that we had to split a national title. Like, it was like, why the fuck can't we just play Michigan after this game, after we destroyed Tennessee and Peyton Manning, and they beat the hell out of, I think it was Ryan Leaf and Washington State. Why can't we just play and determine? I think every fan base agreed. I remember Michigan was really mad too, and they should have. They had Charles Woodson on that team, and just play it out, right?
You want to see some ratings? They should call the alumni from that game, say, hey, let's run it back. Let's see who'd win. Put them in a full padded game.
Yeah, Scott Frost be back there, baby. Let's go.
I mean, I don't know if he's allowed in the state, but okay.
If he played at a neutral site, I don't know how they practice. But I mean, no. But I mean, like they do need to. And I was happy they made that adjustment and went away from the BCS and the split and stuff. It's just you made a good point though. But when does 12 team not be enough, right? When does that happen? 10 years down the road, when more people are complaining about what happened this year, but it happened between the 13th and the 12th team?
Well, I don't think it'll take 10 years. You know what I mean? I mean, how long do we have to sit around and wait for the BCS? You know what I mean? How long was that around for? Like 20 some odd years? I think if anything, what happened this year is going to be a microcosm and will actually expedite more change in the future, right?
Yeah. I'm with you. I just, like I said, I am happy though. I don't want to be sounding negative on the show with this, but I am happy. Finally, we are going to a 12-team playoff though. Finally, I'm stoked for that because, like you just pulled up, there would have been some really, really good games, and a lot of people tuning in to watch. That's for damn sure. And you would have got the best of both teams. All their players would have been playing. I promise you that. Marvin Harrison Jr. would have been playing 100% if he had a shot at the national title. You know what I mean? Even though we had a 2-loss or a 1-loss Ohio State team. So
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. Let's look at some other news here, Chris. Georgia opens as the betting favorite to win the 25 college football playoff. Do you agree?
100%. I will be throwing my bet in for futures on that, by the way. I said that to you, about a month ago? I think so. I said if Carson Beck comes back, you can pencil Georgia. Obviously, you guys got Etienne from Florida as well. That's a huge upgrade at running back for you guys. Yes, I think not Florida, but Georgia will be. I think you pissed Kirby Smart off this year. That's what I think happened. They didn't get in. And Georgia, don't get me wrong, Christian, I want to talk about your Bulldogs for a second before we, wrap it up for the 2023 season. But I know a lot of people are going to say Georgia deserved to be in the playoffs. I think they were one of the 4 best teams all year. Don't get me wrong. But they had the opportunity and they lost to Alabama. So they didn't get in. It was on Georgia controlled their fate there. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you think about Georgia's future next year going forward?
I think the best thing that happened to Georgia that started back-to-back national championships, an impressive 29 game win streak, all this stuff was losing to Alabama. Right? It was losing to Alabama in that SEC championship game. And that straightened them out, and they realized, hey, if we're going to beat them, we can't read the press. We can't buy all the rat poison, as Saban likes to say. And that's every team, right? I mean, you can make that argument about Washington next year. You can make that argument about Ohio State. You can make that argument about whoever you want to. I think, and we're talking about Georgia here, the loss to Alabama in this year's SEC championship was one of the best things to happen because the guys that came back, they are going to have a mission and a purpose. I mean, this year it was just kind of, let's just win every game and go back to back. And they missed some key guys, and they're going to miss a lot of key guys next year. I mean, hell, they had like 31, 32 players jump, in the portal or go to the draft. I mean, that's a big time loss. It is and it isn't, I guess, if you look at it that way. I mean, the same way Bama lost some players too. I think they lost like over 20 some odd players, 25 players from this year. Into the, they lost like 50, I think it was like 18 in the portal, and then they've also had probably 7 or 8 guys declare for the draft already. And Bama next year, they were young this year. And same thing with Georgia. Georgia was kind of young at some positions this year. I felt like they're getting a good bulk of that back, and so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm more excited to see what Freeze does at Auburn. I mean, he's taking over the play calling duties.
Oh boy, I'm with you on that about Bama, Georgia. Real quick, I do think those will be the 2 best teams in the SEC again. I know that's not me. I mean, that's no new news to anybody, but I truly think those 2 teams will be battling it out again. I think you'll find them battling it out for the SEC title next year. I know we got a lot of stuff to talk about before next year, but I mean, that's just kind of where I'm leaning already with both those 2 teams and the success they had this year, having younger rosters.
I will say this though. Apparently, Phil Still or Kevin Still? Kevin Still, he's retiring after a 40-year career, which is crazy to me, man. Alabama's defensive coordinator. Is that going to hurt the Tide, you think? I mean,
no. I'm with you real quick, Christian. I do think he's been around the game forever, but he was only there for a year. He brought him in this offseason again. I know he had coached there previously at one time too, if I'm not mistaken. But man, I think he did. By the way, he did turn Bama's defense around this year. Remember the year before? Their defense was terrible 2 years ago. I mean, they got blown out, 50 by LSU put on them or somebody. Tennessee put a shit ton on them. I'm with you. I think it'll hurt a little bit, but I mean, it seems like Saban just recruits these like great coaches from everywhere, man.
I think personally, because I think Phil Still leaving would have been whatever. I think losing Dallas Turner,
okay,
and a lot of their secondary I think that, and the fact you got to keep in mind too, Michigan bullied them up front. I mean, they were pushing them off the ball, it seemed like, at certain points in that game, and that's not something we're used to seeing with Alabama. I do think it will. I think they're going to take a step back slightly on the defensive side of the ball. Alabama will, but I think the offense will step up a little more. It'll be better than it was this year.
I think you could, if you say that about the defense, I guarantee you the offense will definitely be an improvement. I know Jalen Milroe will be back there, but I 100% don't see them being so dependent on him. He was literally I would say, all their offense this year. He really was.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of weird because it's exactly like what happened with Georgia. Georgia had a true freshman safety and Malachi Starks starting for them. The year they won a championship, and then last year, and then this year, they lost a lot of that interior, and some of their pass rushers, and it's kind of been a little bit different. But we'll see what happens with it. I mean, again, Bama's still going to be good. I mean, that's the one thing from this year. Like, a down year for Nick Saban is like 2 losses. You know what I mean? That's just insane. I know I had him at like 4 losses this year.
It's best coaching job I think he's ever done there at Bama this year. That roster to me was not that good, especially offensively.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the other thing too is, we're getting towards the end of Saban's career, and I'm not saying that because I'm like, oh, I want Saban to retire. I mean, I do. But I think a big part of it is you can see it in Saban. Like, he's not one to just stop what he's doing every week and go give an interview to Pat McAfee. I mean, that to me speaks more, I'm gearing down and I'm ready to kind of step into that next phase of my life. Right?
Right.
And so that to me is kind of where I think we're at. I mean, we'll see how much longer he does it. I think he'll win another championship, and then he'll probably ride off into the sunset. Yeah,
I've said that for a while about Saban. I think he's going to have to go out on top. I do, and I think he could coach forever, a long time. I definitely agree with your statement there. That guy, he's in his 70s. He doesn't look that old, but man, no. he still gets after it, man. Like I said, with him doing his best coaching job I've seen him ever do this year, I don't see him quitting anytime soon unless he probably does win a title. I will agree with that.
Quinshon Judkins, the ex-Ole Miss running back. I mean, guy that was a stud. We were really high on him. He commits to Ohio State. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, one, why is he leaving Ole Miss? Ole Miss had a great year this year with the big win over Penn State in the bowl game. I think they only had Ole Miss only had 2 losses. I mean, 11 and 12, 2 years, something like that. That was a pretty good year for Ole Miss. Their only loss, I think, were to Georgia and LSU. Or no, they beat LSU. Alabama. There you go. Two pretty good teams to lose to. Surprising he transfers, but is it because he sees the writing on the wall that maybe Ole Miss won't be able to do this again next year, and it's better to go to Ohio State, who's probably going to be better?
Well, and that's probably money, because here's the thing, right? You're going to get Phil. What's the guy's name? Pete Golden, I should say. Now, a lot of people aren't really super high on him, and I don't think he did a great job this year, coaching that defense. I mean, if anything, I think they got worse this year on the defensive side of the ball. However, they are, it's going to be a second year next year, and that's where we see a lot of coordinators make their biggest stride is in year 2. Mm-hmm. And they, you look at it, they pulled a ton. I mean, they pulled some of the best defenders out of that portal. I mean, seriously. Let's go take a look at this. Scrolling back up here. They got the number 1 defensive tackle, in this class, 5-star Walter Nolan. You scroll down a little bit more here. Oh, they got this guy from Florida who's an edge player who's also played in the SEC. They've got Tyler Barron, another edge player from Tennessee. They rated Tennessee. They got Juice Wells coming over from South Carolina. I mean, they went out and they had a pretty damn good offseason recruiting that transfer portal, Chris. Getting a ton of good players out of it, especially on the defensive side of the ball. If you keep scrolling down, right now, they're winning the transfer portal, and a lot of that was on the defensive side of the ball. I would have to think they're going to be improved on the defensive side of the ball this year, right? The problem with Ole Miss, and it never really has been, unless it's a major game on the offensive side of the ball, I didn't think.
No, I mean, Lane Kiffin could coach offense. That's pretty well known, but usually it's, they crumble in big games. They really didn't do too bad this year, other than maybe you want to say the Georgia game where they got blown out right away, but that happens. But I'm with you. I was shocked when I heard he was leaving. I mean, the kid led the league in rushing, I believe, as a freshman 2 years ago in the SEC. This year he had still a really good year Super surprised, but I'm assuming it probably came down to some NIL money. I'm sure we all know Ohio State can pay, and they need a running back. Ohio State does. I'm pretty sure Henderson's going to the draft. So,
yeah, I think Henderson's going to the draft. I know they had 2 other guys jump in the portal. I mean, they need it most. I mean, they need a running back, but to be honest with you, they needed a quarterback, and that's something we kind of touch on a little bit. Will Howard, is he the guy? Is he going to be the guy, to lead them back to glory? My question to you is he better than Kyle McCord?
I don't know. Ohio State did score a single touchdown against Mizzou. They scored 3 points to be exact. And Kyle McCord was not your quarterback. Kyle McCord only lost 1 game at Ohio State to a good Michigan team, a great Michigan team. I'll throw that in there. I don't know if I've watched Will Howard play a ton at K-State. To me, he reminds me a lot of Riley Leonard. I mean, I don't know how he's going to fit in Ohio State because you got to be able to sling the rock. Dare I name C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, guys like that could throw the ball over there. I don't know, man. I don't know if he is better than Kyle McCord. I'm sure a lot of people are going to tell me I'm wrong about that, but I don't know.
Yeah, Chris, I want to segue back to something here. Getting back into the national championship game here and the winners. First of all, congrats to Michigan for winning the national championship. I think that's it was a storybook season for them, man. They were on a mission, and hats off to them. Hats off to them. I think they finally got the monkey off their back. And that's fantastic. I mean, I'm glad we got to see a program that hasn't won a national title since the 90s come back and win something of note, right? And it wasn't Ohio State. It wasn't the Clemson or as a Georgia fan, even I can say this, dare I say, Georgia or Alabama. It wasn't the usual suspects, right? It was kind of somebody that has been knocking on that. Yeah, it was both of them, Washington and Michigan. So I thought it was a good game. It was a little boring there. We touched on it. It was a little boring at certain points, but there was drama. At least it was somewhat of a close game. I feel like until about 4 or 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Michigan, though, you said it earlier in the broadcast, Chris. You got a feeling that Sharon Moore is going to probably, if Harbaugh leaves, which we again haven't heard anything yet, it'll probably come out here in the next week or couple weeks. I would imagine that if he does leave, he's going to end up going to the NFL. Michigan could be in for a lot of departures from that team. They were pretty experienced, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, they're a pretty senior lane team. That's what was great about Michigan this year, though. It shows when you bring experience back. They talked about it a ton. If you guys watched the game, was McCarthy wanted to be back there so badly after what happened the year before against TCU. I think they kind of bought into that whole motto, get back here, and they did. And Blake Corum, I mean, they're going to miss him. Donovan Edwards, I think, is a really good running back. Could have started anywhere if it wasn't for Michigan. Roman Wilson, I think he's gone too. I mean, they lose a lot of those key offensive linemen. Zach Zenner, I know definitely he was hurt this game. He was one of the best offensive linemen in the country. He's going to the NFL. Defensively, same thing. They're losing a ton of pieces off that team. I mean, I like I said, even under Moore, if he does, like, let's hypothetically say that Harbaugh does leave for the NFL, which I think he is. If Moore does take the job, I think I don't want to say Michigan's going to fall off. He obviously they love him there. He did a great job filling in for Harbaugh, but Michigan will still be tough. I mean, Michigan isn't going to go anywhere. Michigan, in my lifetime, has always been great at football. They had a couple years under that one clown that they weren't very good for, but other than that, man, they've always been great.
I think it's going to be. I mean, they're going to lose a ton, dude, this year. I mean, Blake Corum's gone. I would almost think Donovan Edwards, especially with that statement game he had last night, he's probably going to be gone. JJ McCarthy might probably be gone too.
He's gone, for sure.
I mean, then you start looking at their offensive line. I mean, all of their offensive line is going to be gone. Receiver wise, I mean, Roman Wilson's probably going to be gone. So same thing with Cornelius Johnson. I mean, the defense, the guys that aren't seniors might probably hit up the draft. I mean, Mason Graham, I think he's draft eligible, if I'm not mistaken. Same thing with Junior Colson. I know he's a junior. Those guys probably, they might jump. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of at that weird waiting game at this point. Knowing what we know, I mean, they will lose some probably on both lines of scrimmage. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they, what they do. I have a weird. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish that. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I have a weird feeling that Michigan is still going to be good, but they might losing Harbaugh and losing a lot of these pieces. If it shakes out the way that I think it's going to, it might be a really weird year for Michigan this year. It might be a down year. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking about the Nick Saban, Alabama, 2-loss kind of down year. I'm talking about they could potentially, while they're trying to figure out life after Harbaugh and life after this class, it could be a 3 or 4 loss team potentially.
Yeah, I could see even a 4-loss team. I know for a fact they have to play Oregon with the new additions of those teams all coming in. It's going to make Big Ten's going to get a lot tougher now. It isn't this cakewalk. We laugh at their schedule all the time, Michigan's, but it's going to be a lot different now with all these other teams. And then obviously there's no divisions, right? Which is huge because you might have to turn around and play Ohio State again or somebody, you know what I mean, for the actual championship instead of beating the hell out of us Big Ten West teams over here. The trash that we throw in there every year with Purdue, Iowa, Wisconsin, you name it. It seems like throw a dart at a dartboard every other year. Somebody's on the West is making that title game and getting blown out by 30 points.
Well, I know they play. I think Washington. What do they play at Washington this year? Don't they?
Yeah, I know they got. I do know they have Oregon. I haven't looked at their schedule. I do know they have Oregon because Dan Lanning was talking about it before the game. They had him on ESPN last night or whatever, and he was saying, "Yeah, we got to play both these teams next year." So
well, I know they play Texas like the 3rd game of the year.
Yeah, Michigan's going to have it's going to. I think. I mean, let's be honest. As a fan base of a team, you take a national title, you trade a bunch of seasons, you do whatever you had to get one national title. I know Michigan was desperate because they've had a lot of good seasons from '97 up until this year where they didn't close the deal. I do know that, and like I said, hats off to Michigan. It's good to see the represent the Big Ten. God, man, we don't get many titles. It seems like it was. I'm happy that we got a Big Ten school to win one once, and it wasn't Ohio State finally.
Daniel says at Washington on October 5th. So that's going to be a good game. I mean, this is kind of what we want. We want to see more exciting games. I feel like, right? That's kind of the big thing here. By the way, I think Texas is getting back Quinn Ewers. Yep. So that'll be, that's going to be that'll be interesting to see how Texas does. I know Georgia plays them at Texas this year.
Yeah, my thoughts on Tech. I got to throw this out here. These Big 12 teams. Throw Oklahoma in there too after their great illustrious showing against Arizona. Don't get me wrong, Arizona's a super hot team this year, but I don't see them competing over the SEC. I don't. That's just me personally. You can chat, comment about it all you want, comment section, but I don't see it happening. I don't. These Big 12 teams to me are soft.
I think the best case is kind of like a 4 or 5 loss team. I kind of would put them in that same category almost as like an Ole Miss, or a Texas A&M, almost. I know Texas A&M last year had a very down year. Last couple of years, matter of fact, it's been a pretty down year for them. But I could see it. You know what I mean? I could see a scenario where, they're kind of the Texas A&Ms where they go like 8-4, 8-5,
right?
9-4 or something like that. So.
Right. But I mean, we heard a lot about a video we posted Texas versus Washington and Texas versus Oklahoma State this year. A lot of Texas fans, swear up and down that Texas is going to basically go run the SEC next year. You know what I mean? It's going to be us, Georgia, and Bama. Put us in the same sentence. Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Hey man, if they can do it, they, hats off to them. I mean, I will say this. I think that in typical Big 12 fashion, they will clip somebody. One of those two teams will clip somebody they shouldn't this year.
I get that, but I'm just saying overall, though. I mean, as far as like competing for here, I'll go on a limb right now. 12-team playoff next year, nor Oklahoma or Texas will be in it.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I know Texas is losing a lot of pieces too. They're losing a ton of pieces. I mean, they're getting some back in the transfer portal, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of hold up in this. That's the thing with the portal is you need time to let those kids come in and develop. I mean, we saw it this year with Colorado. I mean, I think they'll be better this year for what they got last year.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, we'll talk about more about that stuff in the future. But I don't know, something about the Big 12 and the history of that conference the last 12, 15 years it just seems like a lot of flashy offenses and not a lot of consistency winning, no defense.
I agree with you, Chris. I think we're hitting that point now where, it's about that time we sign off. So it's going to probably be a while before we go live again. It's probably going to be a couple months. Like I said, we've been doing this, since February, pretty much every
10
week.
months.
10 months. Could already had a kid by now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, maybe you do. You just don't know about it. No,
we know you're too old over there.
Yeah. Mine don't even work. No, I will say this. We're going to have some more changes coming into next year. Like I said, this was a fun year. By the way, Daniel's one of the guys that stuck with us since we started. We do appreciate the support. It's been a lot of fun, man. We met some really cool people doing this. From different fan bases, by the way. I think sometimes if you read comment sections, it's kind of funny how I talk about this a lot, but a lot of people will watch a video and then because we picked Michigan to beat Washington, for example, everybody thinks that we just hate Washington. But if you go back a week before, we picked Washington over Texas. Texas people hate us. It's just kind of funny how it works in the world of sports. But Christian and I, like I said, we love college football as a whole. We do have our favorite teams, obviously, but I just love I love watching great football. I'll leave it at that. Christian, you got probably add on to that a little bit if you want, man.
Yeah, I think like you said, I mean, a lot of people, I think, they only come in and they see some of the breakdowns or the previews that we do and they think, oh my God, we didn't pick their specific team to win. And I get it, right? I completely get it, right? We all have our biases, right? We all have our teams that we root for. We all have our teams that we absolutely can't stand. Me and Chris, we try not to do that. I mean, hell, I think, as I responded to somebody, I said, look, I picked Washington to win the Pac-12, you know what I mean, in the middle of the summer. I think we even had them in the playoff at one point.
We did.
And not a lot of pundits were really probably putting them in that category. They were really high on USC. They were really high on Oregon. Washington was kind of that third team there that was kind of like the redheaded stepchild almost. And like you said, it was thanks to somebody like Daniel. I think we got out of our comfort zone a little more. We started really doing the Pac-12 more. We started trying to do it more justice. So I really appreciate that. I think going into next year, I'm going to have more of a greater understanding for that. I know Chris will too. Of looking at other teams and other conferences, which is weird because this was the last year of the Pac-12, and so now it's all Big Ten and SEC pretty much.
I have no choice to love the Pac-12 coming over here with their 4 teams. But Christian's right. And by the way, I wanted to say this, not that this one will probably get out there. I hit 70% of our picks on the channel. Christian hit 68.5 this year, by the way. That is really impressive. Christian had some of the biggest upsets of the year, the Duke game over Clemson, a couple other ones. We do kind of know what we're talking about over here. We do get it right more than we get it wrong. I want to throw that in there.
Oh, shit. Here's the next one. Old Gator Swag himself.
Like a tumbleweed, he blows back in finally.
I guess we got to focus on basketball. Man, I can't do it. I can't segue into basketball.
I watch a lot of basketball, but yeah, come on, man. Hey, you know what, though? I will say this. Florida's going to be talked about a lot on this channel this upcoming season. I can guarantee you that with everything going on there. There's a lot of teams. My Huskers definitely included in that category as well.
Yeah, man. It's I will say this for basketball season only. Go Gators. Yeah, we'll say that. We'll say that. Go Dogs. Go any SEC team for that matter. You know what I mean? We don't get to say that enough during basketball season. So, but now we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna probably take a couple months off from the live stream and stuff, kind of regroup and kind of get refocused. And I think probably around middle of March is when we're gonna come back. We're still gonna put videos out and stuff. So be sure to kind of keep looking onto the channel and, kind of liking some of the videos and stuff that come out. And man, I'm excited. Like I said, this is my favorite part, the off season, because everybody gets to be off season champions, right?
Yeah. It starts over, right? Everybody in this team that sucked like Florida and Nebraska, everybody can come in, go with 100-0 this year. You get to reset if they call it that. I love that part. We have a lot of fun. The off season is a lot of fun. I will say that. I know there's not any football on, but it's fun to talk shit to everybody else, especially this year. I'm going to talk a lot of shit about the Georgia Bulldogs. So,
is Kirby going to Atlanta? Yeah,
there it is. Start the rumor.
I mean, I keep hearing that rumor. I think he's just trying to get a head start on the SEC championship this year.
Ooh, wee. Yeah, it's good stuff. But hey, by the way, guys, like I said, though, I do appreciate it. Please like, comment, subscribe, do what you got to do. It does go a long ways. So I want to say thank you to everybody that's been on this channel. Daniel, Gator Swag, even though we don't agree on anything, I do appreciate it. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah, we'll catch you guys here in March. You know, we're going to get ready to get back at it, guys. We'll catch you then.